Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Amanda for those of you that are new to the channel. For those of you who've been here before, welcome back again, and to friends and family, g'day. So spring, summer, girls are laying an awful lot of eggs and they need to be used. And so the quickest way that I know to use all of these eggs really fast and to have quick and easy ready to go meals both in the fridge and the freezer is to make a form of quiche. And there are several types of quiche that I make. So I'm going to go through and share with you some of our recipes that we use here on a regular basis. And the main one at the end is the breakfast quiche that everybody loves, and it never lasts very long in the fridge, but it uses the most eggs. So let's move on. So I went out to the Hands outlet a couple of weeks ago and I picked up some prosciutto ends. These were $3.99 a kilo and I have 400 grams in the bowl here. So not a very expensive meat at all, but I'm going to turn this 400 grams into several meals by adding a few other ingredients, just simple ingredients that are in most people's refrigerator. So let's get this simply done. Let's make up several quick and easy snacks and quick meals for the family to have at the end of the day. Let's go. So the first recipe I'm going to make is I'm going to be doing a quiche, very similar to a quiche Lorraine, just a bit slightly different. I'm going to make off my short crust pastry. So I need 125 grams of butter, just like so. And then to that, I just need to add 250 grams of flour, preferably an all-purpose flour instead of a bread flour, but I've only got the bread flour, so that's what I'm going to be using. It will make the dough slightly different, so an all-purpose flour has got less protein in it than the bread flour, but because I'm not taking a trip all the way down to Costco to collect a bag of flour this week, I do have to go next week. There's my 250 grams of my bread flour. Just going to mix that butter and the flour together just with my hands. We just want to coat all of the flour with the cold butter. So I'm not going to add any salt because the butter that I've used has been a butter that I've made and just with fresh cream, and it is a salted butter. So I'm not going to add any additional salt to this mix. The only other two ingredients I need to add to this is 1 egg and some water. The total amount that I need is 80 grams. So it's not a difficult recipe to remember. It's not a difficult recipe to remember. It's only 4 ingredients. It's just working it through. Now, every egg will weigh a different amount. The total amount I need altogether for this pastry is 80 grams. I'll weigh off one of my eggs. A normal egg would be about 53, 55 grams or so for a standard chicken egg. Like I said, I'm going to be using bantam eggs, so I'll need to weigh mine first. So once this resembles fine breadcrumbs, which is what it's doing now, you're ready to add your wet ingredients to that. Cold hands, cold flour, cold bowl, all helps, and a cold day preferably, although we do have storms coming. This is just going to be a very simple mix. Now, depending on the dish that you're going to be using, if it's a shallow tart tin that's made of metal, they cook really well, and so you don't need to blind bake off your dough. If you're using a ceramic pie type tin, you would need to normally cook it off and do a blind bake. It's one step I don't want to do. It takes more time as well, not to mention the cost of running the power for the oven. So I'm going to avoid that step. Let me go and get some eggs and we will weigh them up. So I have 2 eggs that I have cracked. I've soaked and tested them because they're fresh eggs and these are fertile. They've got the little bullseyes on them. And I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to be getting any unanticipated little visitors in my egg mix. I'm just going to weigh that out. 69 grams. So I just need another 10 grams of water. I will keep the water close by because with it being a bread flour, I might need more. So I'll just mix all this together, keeping it really simple. So the quiche will be prosciutto and cheese and maybe some onion, not really sure yet. Let's see what I've got in the refrigerator because I just want to use up all the leftover ingredients that are in the fridge One thing I've been wanting to do, because we've got excess eggs, is some quiches. And usually I would do quiche, and I'd do mini quiche as well. This time I'm just going to do one large one. This one will be perfect for, like I said, the men in the family, because they will eat the meat. And I do have the prosciutto, and there's not much point having 4 kilos of prosciutto and fresh bacon in the fridge and freezer and not putting it to use. So turning it into a meal makes a lot more sense. So this here is just my dough for my quiche, really simply. And it doesn't need any more liquid from the feel of it. So that 80-gram total amount seems fine. Bread flour, being more glutinous, having more gluten content and protein, is a bit more sticky and stretchy. So the base, if I was to pre-cook it, it will shrink a little bit, which is not something I particularly want to happen, which is why I'm going to cook it off at the same time as I cook the eggs, and that way the eggs are cooking with the pastry. As the pastry shrinks, it'll all cook at the same time, right, if that makes sense. Alrighty, that's our dough, and it simply needs to be put into our dish. Now I can put this back in the fridge for a little while and let it get cold again, and I might just do that because it is a bit of a warm day. I'll put it in the refrigerator while I am cutting up all of the ingredients for the quiche. So I'm just going to chop up the prosciutto. So this is all for the quiche, which essentially is going to be like a quiche Lorraine. It's just going to be a bit more enriched by using the prosciutto instead of using bacon. So prosciutto is a cured meat, so it can be eaten as it is. It doesn't actually have to be cooked. But I will be cooking off just a little bit, just to soften it slightly. So I'm just going to chop these pieces up into little cubes, and then we'll go from there. They're all about 1/2 centimetre in diameter, so they're quite thin, and I'll just shred them all up. So that is my 400 grams of the prosciutto. I really only need about 200 grams for one of these quiche, so I'll reserve 1/2 of the prosciutto because I will be adding some homemade smoked bacon to the mix as well. So I will measure out 200 grams, including some of that prosciutto fat that you've just seen me adding back into it as well, because that's going to help render down when I cook this amount. So I only need 200 grams for this recipe, and this is just prosciutto. Like I said, it's because it was picked up at such a good price that it has to get used as well. We don't let it go to waste. So that's my 200 grams, and I will go and get some of the bacon. So when I was packing up the bacon, vacuum sealing it all, I had some little pieces left over. This is 150 grams. Instantly smell the smoke from the smoker. So completely different, although it's still pork, it's a completely different flavour profile to add to this quiche, which is basically going to be a bacon and cheese quiche. So like I said, I've been wanting to do quiche for some time because of the excess eggs that we have, and so it's a good way during this time of year as it's warming up, especially today, even though I know we've got a storm coming, the humidity is pretty high. So to be able to just have a quick, easy-go meal for everybody other than those of us who don't eat the meat is a good option. The quiches, I can also do a beautiful salmon one, and I have some salmon that we've been pressure canning as well that I can use in one of the quiche. All right, so that's my smoked bacon. So I'll add that to my prosciutto. Now the smoked bacon, although it was hot smoked bacon, I am still going to have to cook it off. So all of this needs to go into a fry pan to crisp up. Alrighty, a couple of minutes and I have fried off the prosciutto and the bacon together. Smells amazing. Time to get the pastry into the quiche pan. So I will be, this has just come out of the refrigerator, so it's nice and chilled. This is my grandmother's old rolling pin. So the pan that I'm going to be using isn't a big one. It is only a 25 centimetre old-fashioned pan. So that's what I need to roll out is 25 centimetres plus the sides, and it's only a shallow, probably just over 1 inch. So before the butter gets too soft, we'll just roll out our pastry-ish, close enough to the size that we need to get it into the quiche tray, and then I'll just press it into shape for the remainder. Pretty simple. Just a couple of ingredients out of the pantry. If you don't have a shortcrust pastry, you can substitute for puff pastry if you've got puff pastry, or if you're not making the pastry by hand. But to make the pastry by hand takes a couple of minutes, and it's just a few ingredients, so it's certainly worth to do. All right, that's it, done. And I will simply pop that onto the rolling pin and roll it back up again, like so. Bring my quiche tray down, and I will transfer my pastry. So I have got 8 of my bantam eggs. I'm going to need to add 3 cups of milk to that. So to my 8 eggs, I've got 3 cups of milk. Just going to whisk those well together, and then I'll season it as well. Now, the prosciutto and the smoked bacon both contain a fair bit of salt, so I shouldn't need to add salt, but I will add some freshly ground pepper, and I might also add some onion powder as well. So I'm not going to use onions because my son doesn't like the texture. Neither does my husband, particularly in a quiche. So we still want the flavour, but we just don't want to have the texture of fresh onions. Okay, and some parsley, because I've got plenty of dried parsley. So I'm just going to add a teaspoon of white ground pepper, bell peppers, just for colour, and a teaspoon of parsley that's been dried from the garden as well. Again, colour and flavour. That's my dried ingredients. I'm going to sneak in some mushroom powder as well. So again, just some dehydrated mushroom, and the same. I'm just going to add, I don't want to particularly change the flavour that using fresh mushrooms would do. The family don't like fresh mushrooms. I don't mind them, but they don't like them. All I've got to do is mix all this together, and then I'll be able to get the ingredients, and we'll start making the quiche. This will be enough to do 2 of those quiche. So I've also got 100 grams of Edam cheese that I've grated as well. Pastry has been chilling in the refrigerator just for the last 10-15 minutes while I prepared the eggs. So now it's time to add our ingredients. So into our quiche tray is where I'm going to add all of this beautiful prosciutto and our bacon. This is quite a bit, actually, considering the size of the pastry case, but I'm not adding other ingredients, vegetables, to this one. So it is basically a bacon and cheese quiche. At least then I know it's definitely going to get eaten. To that, I'm going to add half of my cheese down on the bottom. I'm going to save some to put on the top as well. This quiche would be perfect to have other flavours added to it as well. But, you know, boys being boys, they want it simple. So we're just keeping it simple. I've got enough of my egg mixture to make 2 quiche. I'm just going to pour over the egg until it's almost filled the case. Then I'm just going to add the remainder of that cheese. I've got the oven preheating at 180 degrees, and I'm going to cook this quiche for about 25 minutes. That's enough time for the pastry to cook through, and the egg as well. So about 25 minutes. And that's it, done. Into the oven she goes. Now, while the oven is on, a perfect way to use the remainder of the egg so that I don't have to make yet another pastry, which it's fine to do, but I can also do a crustless quiche at the same time. So using a ceramic pie dish this time, I'm going to just do a really simple crustless variety. So I'm going to grab all of the jars off the shelves, and we'll make our second quiche from them. So I've got some trout, rainbow trout, that was canned back in September. That was pressure canned, and I also have some caramelised onion jam as well. So I'm going to be using that in with the trout, which looks beautiful. We're going to be adding the trout. I'm just going to drain off that liquid. So in my bowl, I'm going to just add my rainbow trout. I only drained off the liquid, not because there was anything wrong, it's just all of the juices from the trout itself. It's just I don't want the quiche to be too wet, so I have reserved the juices in the fridge to go into a soup. Easy. So that's my trout. Yum. I'm going to add, some of the caramelised onion jam. For those that are wondering, the trout is a very subtle flavour, not as strong as what salmon is. So it lends itself to having additional flavours added. And so that's why I'm adding the beautiful caramelised onion jam to it. I'm also going to add, because this will be for me, and I don't mind a bit of spice, so I'm going to go and get my hickory spice powder. This is hickory smoke powder. It's usually used in all of the rubs that I use for doing the meat. The smell and taste is just beautiful. So I'm going to be adding that in with my quiche. And then we're going to zhuzh it up. We need some corn and some capsicum. So I've got some sweet corn. Rich. Some fresh sweet corn. And I have some lovely rainbow capsicum. So I'm going to be using those ingredients. Not all of them, but a good few spoons in each to help bulk up this quiche. So this is the capsicum, which has just been, again, pressure canned. Just fresh bell peppers. So they're already cooked, so it's good to use them in a recipe like this. And this here is our fresh sweet corn. It's also getting added. Once again, I've got 100 grams of Edam cheese that I have grated. So I'm going to add that as well to our mixture. Just combine all of that and then add the milk the milk and the eggs to this mix as well. And just fold that all through so it's all well mixed together, evenly mixed. Oh, that hickory smoke smells so nice. It's like a barbecue without having a barbecue. All right, so that's our protein. We'll add our eggs to it. Because this is a crustless quiche, I want to make sure all of those ingredients are well covered by the egg mixture. So another word for this is a frittata. Quite often they're called frittatas or crustless quiche. Either way, either or, they are the same thing. Just depends on what country you're coming from. So that there is our next quiche. I'm just going to put that into my pan. Make sure the ingredients are well combined. And then it can go into the oven as well. Again, 25 minutes. Or until it's all golden and brown and not jiggly wiggly in the middle. Right, done. Alrighty, so first quiche is out of the oven. So we're just going to let this one chill. So this is the bacon and the prosciutto. So we're just going to let that one chill while the other one is still cooking. And that will be our second crustless quiche. Now it's been removed. This is the trout one. Time for it to cool down as well. Looks pretty good. So first step for me, because they are fresh eggs, I need to do my float test. So I have put in a dozen eggs into the bottom here. They're bantam eggs. They've come from outside in the chicken pen, so fresh eggs. And so I'm just making sure, because of the change of temperature, as well as I've got clucky hands, I just want to make sure that I'm not going to get any surprises, as I've said before, when it comes to the eggs. Then I need to crack them all individually. So these are all fine. They're all sitting nice and flush on the bottom of the water. Water's not going to get wasted either. And I'm going to break open all of my eggs, and we're going to start making some of our quiches in a few different ways. You need a few different ingredients, not too many, not complicated, just ingredients that I already have on hand. The last quiche recipe, which is the Juju one from the family, that one everybody loves. So I'm going to go and get some ingredients. We're going to make a start with a bacon and cheese quiche and then move on from there. So for our third quiche, we're going to crack open a dozen eggs. Now, if you are going to be making this quiche, you can increase the number of eggs that you're going to use if you make the pastry base yourself. I'm going to be using puff pastry, so I don't need to add extra eggs, and 12 eggs is the right amount for this recipe because we are going to reduce the cheese and the milk. So the ingredients that we're going to be using for this quiche, we're going to use puff pastry, we're going to use 12 eggs, we're going to use a tub of dip, French onion, and I've got some shredded leg ham. These are little 170-gram packets already pre-shredded up. I usually use these on the pizzas, and so I'm really making this simple because this is the last one. Very last ingredient, and you can substitute this one if you wish to. This one is a whipping cream, just a small amount, 250 ml of whipping cream. You can substitute this for evaporated milk, or you can do half and half milk and cream if you like. I'm only using ingredients that I have, and I want some creaminess as well to go with this. And then we'll top it all off with some cheese on top. So let's get to mixing. For this one, I am using a deeper dish, and it is a Pyrex one. So I'm going to be cooking off just a quick blind bake of the puff pastry that I'm using. If you're using a shortcrust pastry, same thing. You'll need to blind bake if you're using the higher sided dishes, just because they won't cook properly and you'll end up with a soggy base, and nobody wants a soggy base. These quiche will remain in the refrigerator. The previous quiche that I made a couple of days ago, they're gone. So we need to start meal prepping once again today. So we'll begin with this quiche, which is the breakfast quiche. And it's going to, I'm just going to put my puff pastry on top like that and just let it defrost because it's come out of the freezer, as it does, because I'm not making puff pastry. Now, puff pastry can be a bit thin, so I'm doubling it up so that I end up with a good firm base. Like I said, this is going to be pre-cooked. So I'm just going to leave those two sheets. They will fall down in my tray when they're ready, and then that gives me two more sheets that I'm going to use for the sides, and anything left over will get put onto a baking tray with some ham and some cheese and just turned into some quick, easy little scrolls. So nothing's going to get to waste. Okay, let's make our mix up. Start with 12 eggs. And yeah, these are bantam eggs, but it's still 12 eggs. Doesn't matter what size they are, as long as you've got a dozen eggs for the centre. We're just going to add a pinch of salt or two, some pepper. So keeping just the typical breakfast theme, I'm just using black pepper. So again, just a pinch of that, probably quarter of a teaspoon, half a teaspoon, maybe. Not very much, because it is quite strong. Okay, simple. In goes the dip. So this one here is a French onion. It's 200 grams. If you don't have French onion dip, you can use French onion packet soup mix with some cream cheese instead. If you don't have cream cheese, that's okay. You can just switch out this ingredient and have freshly diced onions that have been cooked off instead, so that they're nice and caramelized. I could add the caramel jam once again, onion jam once again. But this gives us a creamy texture, and it reduces the amount of cheese that I need to add because it's got the cream cheese added to it. It's also really creamy. All right, so then that just needs to be all mixed well together. So I'm just whisking it through. Make sure that it's well combined. Never going to get out all of the lumps because the dip obviously contains pieces of onion. So as long as most of that cream cheese is well mixed and combined, we're good to go. We need to add the ham. Alrighty, I'm going to mix that through with a spatula. Alrighty, cheese. So I am reducing the amount of cheese that I'm using. So I'm not using a cheddar or anything like that, but I am going to add in some mozzarella. So I've got this whopping great big slab, 2.72 or 6 pound of mozzarella. And I needed to divvy it up into smaller sizes anyway for the freezer. So we are going to be adding some cubes of mozzarella. All right, so that's 250 grams of mozzarella. Like I said, I need to grate some, so I'm just going to put some aside. It's about 80 grams left over. All right, the rest of it I'm just going to cube up into small pieces, and that'll just give the quiche a couple of stretchy, bitey pockets of surprises throughout the meal when they're eating it. So that's my mozzarella that's been chopped, just diced into little cubes, nothing special. These are just really simple to make, quick and easy quiches. These are really good. This one here is a breakfast quiche, or as a grab and go for lunches and snacks as well. If you've got somebody that loves to open the refrigerator, have a look what's inside and go, yeah, I'll have some of that. This can also be done individually as small mini quiches. Uses a bit more puff pastry. They don't need to be blind baked. They just need to be cooked off in muffin molds. But I want to do large ones. Alrighty, so I'm just going to press in my puff pastry. Do a little bit of trimming. So by cutting down, because I'm using a round dish and putting in a square piece of pastry, obviously that doesn't quite work. We don't want raw pastry. So I'm just cutting all of my corners until I reach the base. Once I've reached the base, I can fold my pastry back over on itself. And I don't have really big, thick pockets of puff pastry anywhere. Just pressing it in, making sure she's all in. So that's my base. And then all I have to do is do the little pieces that go around the outside. Pretty simple. So just cut my sheets into 4 strips, remembering they're doubled up. All right, and then I'm going to line overlapping just slightly and then going around right over the edge of this one, because I want it to float right up, because we do have quite a bit of mix, and I want to make sure that there's no chance that it's going to overflow. So I'm just going to flute the pastry just like you would do if you were making a pie. So folding it back on itself and creating a fluted edge. If you've got a fluted pie dish, then just press it into your fluted pie dish. I don't like the fluted ceramic pie dishes. For me, they don't hold enough, which is why I always go back to these larger, deeper dishes when I'm doing this particular quiche. And also, this is a lot more forgiving for heat, being Pyrex. It doesn't take much to pre-cook it. So the oven is already heating at 180 degrees from the previous quiches. So the oven's just warming back up again. I'm just preparing this base. And then it's going to go into the oven. And I'm going to make sure it's well cooked off. So we are just going to prick off the edges and all around the bottom as well, just to make sure it doesn't rise too much. We could blind bake with ceramic beads or beans, etc. in the bottom of it, but that's just another step that I don't want to do. What I am going to do is, because I want a gorgeous golden pastry around the top, I'm going to find the pastry brush again, and I'm just going to use some of the egg mix that we've just made our quiche with, and I'm just going to use that around the edge. It's also got the seasonings in it as well, so I'm not wasting anything. I don't have to make any more, thank goodness. I don't have to crack any more eggs. But if you want to, go for it. Use some extra eggs. It's another way to put extra eggs into this dish. So I'm just literally going around the edge, and then this one can go into the oven after I prick it a little bit on the bottom. So no, I haven't forgotten about that ingredient. We'll add that after. Quiche base has been all pricked. Into the oven this can go. Alrighty, timer set, 15 minutes. We're going to let that base cook. Well, mostly cook anyway, before we go adding our filling. Now, you can add anything you like to your filling. Okay, this is just a breakfast one that we used repeatedly. I know without even tasting this one, because it does contain ham. I don't eat ham, but I know exactly its flavourings and spices, etc. So I don't need to add anything else to it if I keep it basic. When I start adding other things, I need to add parsley to it, but that's not going to change its flavour too much. So really good with capsicum. A couple of different quiches that we grew up on. And I used to, once upon a time, work in a deli when I was a very, very young 14-year-old. And we would have our salmon and capsicum quiche. We would always have a quiche Lorraine. We would always have a breakfast quiche, which was the ham and cheese, which is very similar to the quiche Lorraine, but slightly different. They were the main quiches that we would stock and sell, along with an English pork pie and things like that. So I've always just continued to make them. And when I started working in catering, when I was, once again, very young, we would be making little individual quiches for the patrons. And so we would have lots of different flavours, and that's when lots of spices and flavourings and different changes, like adding sausage meat to this one, balled up pieces of sausage meat, just squeeze it out of your sausage casings. And I could do that because I do have sausages that I've made in the refrigerator, and I'm looking at this thinking, do I want to do that? No, I don't. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to keep this one traditional family recipe, the zhuzh pie. It's the breakfast pie. Used to be really useful for the men in the mornings after a bit of a session the night before. Parsley. I need to go find it. So this recipe has been made hundreds of times. And it's really good, like I said, to take to work. It's good to have in the refrigerator. It's good to put in the freezer. It's easily able to be made into individual little ones instead. You can also use this with pizza base and make a pizza base and form a high crust and fill it up with the egg mixture and then bake that in the oven. And that is a really good way to get everything that you would normally have for breakfast, especially if you put the sausage ball meat in it as well. And you end up with sausages, bacon, cheese, bread, toast, eggs, and not to forget a little bit of cream. So I'm going to just use half a cup of the cream. So this is a whipping cream. So it's just UHT stable. I don't know if people know about this one. UHT, which means it can stay in the cupboard, and whenever I'm doing a recipe that requires whipping cream, I can pull this guy out. So they're handy to have. They still add that lovely velvet luxury to a quiche, that gorgeous creaminess. Don't forget that we've also got that beautiful creamy dip as well in here, which will add another level of soft creaminess to this quiche as well, which is why there are 12 eggs. Because it's quite a rich dish, having the 12 eggs makes sure that it stays quite firm, which is why it's ideal to freeze, which is why we use this recipe and just have always done. Pop used to make them as little individual ones. We would have them as individual ones in muffin casings, no pastry, no nothing, just as a straight breakfast addition. This can also be fried off in a fry pan and just made as an omelette. Such a versatile mix. Alrighty, but it's not. It's going into that casing. As soon as that's ready, I'm going to upgrade my mozzarella. We're ready to go. Okay, alarm's just gone off, so I'll just take out the quiche base that's been cooking in the oven and just to check it. But what you're looking for is you don't want to see any translucency in the bottom. Okay, so you want to see this has turned white and is fluffy, which is exactly what it is. So it's now ready, and the outside's lovely and golden brown, starting to crisp up. It's time to fill this case with our mixture, which it's just going to go straight in. Then I'm just going to make sure all of the ham and cheese is evenly distributed. See, 12 eggs, perfect. Because it will puff up as it's cooking as well, but that doesn't matter. As long as it stays within the edges of that base. which is exactly what it's doing. So it can't escape. It's like a river. Then all we've got to do is add the cheese to the top, and we are done. Back into the oven it goes for a good 25 minutes until there's no jiggle wiggle in the center, because we want to be able to cut this and put it in the refrigerator as well. Not that it's going to last very long. Out of the 2 previous quiches that were made 2 days ago, for anybody wondering, there is 4 slices of the trout one left, because that's mine. There's 4 pieces of the trout left. The other one is gone, which is why I'm making a 3rd one. There we go. Into the oven. About 25 minutes. We'll come back. Rightio. Out of the oven she comes. This has taken 35 minutes, and I have checked it several times to make sure as it's cooking, because it's a bit larger than the short-sided one. This is a deep dish, okay? So that was the alarm that just went off, so it's 35 minutes. So when you use a skewer, you'll feel it's a feel thing. You'll feel how dense it is on the outside, because it will cook from the outside to the inside. And then you make your way to the center, checking your skewers clean each time. But you'll feel it gets quite soft in the center. That's because it's not 100% cooked through here yet, but it is well cooked all on the outside. See, there's a bit of a jiggle as I press down. Okay, this is all nice and firm on the outside, but in the center, although the top is cooked through, it's still a little bit squishy in the center. That's fine. There's enough heat in this quiche to continue to cook while it's cooling down for the next at least 20 minutes. So I don't want to overcook my eggs. So having a little jiggle like that is perfect. Alrighty, and that there is our quiche, the breakfast quiche, out of the oven, done. So guys, that's a really quick way to use up quite a lot of eggs. We've used 10 in the beginning for the first 2 quiche and another dozen in this one. So that's almost 2 dozen eggs that I've managed to use up in just a couple of days, which is fine when the girls are laying a dozen eggs a day. You know, you need to get creative when it comes to doing all the baking. Now, if I was to make individual ones of this breakfast quiche, I could easily use 2 dozen odd the eggs straight away. You don't always have to use a quiche base or a pastry base if you want to do individual breakfast eggs in a muffin tray. Just simply oil the muffin trays up, put your ingredients, your ham, your cheese, whatever you want individually into your muffin trays, and crack an egg in there, mix it together, and straight in the oven. Nice and simple. You don't even have to add the extra milk or cream to those if you don't want to, or you can just make this base and pour it into the individual muffin tins as well. And then they can be frozen individually and used as snacks and meals and lunches throughout the week as well. So it's a really good way to use if you've got the freezer space to use them. Whereas with us, we're just making up the quiches as we go, as we have the excess eggs. And that way, every other day, I'll make a different quiche up throughout the week until we get through the big heavy lays of our birds. I also need to keep enough for the baking, because it's also time to do that as well. And also mac and cheese. My mac and cheese uses eggs as well. So that's another job to do today as well, which will use another 6 eggs. So by the end of today, I'm going to be using 2.5 eggs. Not too bad. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Like and share. And if you've got any comments, let me know. And if you've tried any of these ingredients and recipes that I've been doing, let me know. And to those of you who have been commenting, thanks very much. I do read and respond to most of them, if not all of them. So it's been great sharing all of our family recipes with everybody, as well as the family. All righty. Thanks, guys. See you all soon. Bye now.